Clara May Harrison sat at her kitchen table in her modest Atlanta home, the morning sun filtering through the lace curtains she'd sewn herself years ago. At 67, her hands bore the marks of a life spent scrubbing floors and polishing silver for families who never knew her name. The coffee in her mug was still warm, its bitter aroma mingling with the faint sweetness of a pecan Danish from the corner bakery. Her cell phone, an old model she'd clung to despite its cracked edges, buzzed softly on the table. She picked it up, expecting a photo of her neighbor's new grandchild or a church announcement. Instead, the screen glowed with a picture that stopped her heart. It was her daughter, Hope, radiant in a white wedding gown, her arm linked with a man Clara barely recognized, Devon Hayes. They stood outside a small chapel, smiling broadly, flanked by Devon's parents, Franklin and Eleanor Hayes. The caption beneath the photo read, "Our perfect day. Family forever." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Family forever. But where was she? Her eyes scanned the image again, searching for herself, as if she might appear in the background, unnoticed. She wasn't there. No call, no invitation, no whisper of a wedding. Her only child had married without her. The phone slipped from her trembling fingers, hitting the linoleum floor with a dull thud. The screen didn't crack, it still glowed, mocking her with that frozen moment of joy she hadn't been part of. Clara's mind raced. Had Hope forgotten to tell her? Was it a mistake? She dialed Hope's number, her heart pounding as the call went straight to voicemail. "Hope, baby, it's Mama. I saw a picture. Are you married?" Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out. "Call me, please." The silence on the other end was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of Atlanta's morning traffic. She tried again, then a third time, each unanswered call carving a deeper wound. Finally, hours later, a text arrived. "I'm fine, Mama. Got married yesterday. Small thing, just family. Talk soon. Just family." The words echoed in Clara's mind, each syllable a hammer striking her sense of self. She had raised Hope alone after her husband, Elijah, died in a construction accident when Hope was 3. Every sacrifice, every extra shift cleaning houses, every skipped meal to afford Hope's school supplies had been for her daughter. And now, just family didn't include her. Clara stared at the photo again, Hope's smile brighter than she'd ever seen it. Devon, tall and polished, looked like he belonged in a world Clara could never touch. Franklin and Eleanor, dressed in tailored elegance, stood proudly beside them. Clara felt like an outsider peering into a life that had moved on without her. She deleted the photo, her thumb shaking as she pressed the icon. The silence in her kitchen was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. A question formed in her mind, one she couldn't answer. What does a mother do when she's no longer family? For 67 years, Clara had believed family was everything. She'd grown up in a small Georgia town, the daughter of a seamstress and a factory worker, learning early that love meant sacrifice. When Elijah died, leaving her with a toddler and a mountain of bills, she'd taken on 2 cleaning jobs, one for the Roadwalls in Buckhead, another for the Millers in Sandy Springs. She'd scrubbed their floors until her knees ached, polished their silver until her hands cracked, all to give Hope a chance at a better life. She'd saved every penny for Hope's college tuition, dreaming of the day she'd walk her daughter down the aisle, her heart full of pride. But that dream had been shattered in a single Facebook post. Clara's mind drifted to the past, to the moments that had defined her as a mother. When Hope was 5, she'd caught pneumonia, her small body racked with fever. Clara had worked all day at the Roadwalls, then stayed up nights sewing curtains for the Millers to afford the medicine. She'd driven Hope to the doctor, held her hand through every coughing fit, and prayed over her until the fever broke. When Hope recovered, she'd wrapped her arms around Clara and said, "Mama, when I get married, you'll be my maid of honor, the prettiest one ever." Those words had been Clara's anchor for years, a promise that their bond was unbreakable. She thought of Hope's sweet 16, a celebration Clara had saved for over 2 years. She'd sold her wedding ring to afford the Magnolia Room in Midtown, cooked a feast of soul food herself, and bought Hope a lavender dress that made her glow. The guests had marveled at the love in every detail, and Hope had hugged her, whispering, "You're the best mama in the world." Clara had believed her, believed that every sacrifice was worth it. But now, sitting in her quiet kitchen, she wondered when that love had faded, when she'd become an afterthought. The days that followed were a blur of pain and disbelief. Clara kept busy, cleaning her house, attending St. Jude's Episcopal Church, chatting with her neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez. But the ache in her chest never left. She called Hope again, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. She sent texts, pretending she hadn't seen the photo, asking if Hope was okay. The responses were curt, distant, busy, Mama. Talk later. Later never came. Clara lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of their life together, searching for the moment she'd lost her daughter. She remembered the small changes over the years. In college, Hope had grown distant, her visits home less frequent. She'd talk about study groups, new friends, a world Clara didn't understand. When she met Devon in her final year, her eyes lit up in a way Clara hadn't seen before. Devon was ambitious, from a good family, as Hope put it. Clara had been happy for her, but uneasy. The first time Devon came to dinner, Clara had cooked her best meal, fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, but his polite smile and quick glances around their modest home made her feel small. Hope had been nervous, explaining away their simple life as if it needed justification. After that, Devon's visits grew rare, and Hope's excuses grew frequent. Devon and I have plans, Mama. Sunday dinners with Clara's sister-in-law, Auntie Dolores, stopped altogether. When Hope graduated with her business degree, Clara had wept with pride, but at the celebratory dinner with Devon's parents, she'd felt out of place. Franklin and Eleanor Hayes spoke of vacations and fine dining, their world a universe away from Clara's. When she mentioned her cleaning jobs, the table fell silent, and Hope quickly changed the subject. Later, Hope had said, Mama, you don't need to share everything. They're refined people. The word refined had stung, implying Clara was anything but. As Hope and Devon's relationship grew, Clara's role in her daughter's life shrank. Hope moved into a sleek apartment in an upscale part of Atlanta, and visits became scheduled, like appointments. Call before you come, Mama, Hope had said. Clara complied, her heart breaking with each restriction. Last Christmas, Hope had spent the holiday with the Hayeses, promising to host next year. That promise, like so many others, went unfulfilled. In February, Hope mentioned wedding plans, and Clara's heart soared, imagining dress fittings and flower arrangements. But the details remained vague, the conversations fleeting. We're still figuring it out, Mama, Hope would say, her eyes avoiding Clara's. Now, as Clara sat in her kitchen, the truth settled like a stone in her stomach. Hope hadn't forgotten to invite her. She'd chosen to exclude her. The realization was a knife, cutting through years of love and sacrifice. Clara's life had revolved around being Hope's mother, but to Hope, she was a footnote, a relic of a past she'd outgrown. The pain was deeper than when Elijah died, because this wasn't loss, it was rejection. But in that pain, something stirred. A spark of anger, of resolve. Clara had spent her life giving everything to Hope, but she was more than a mother. She was a woman with her own dreams, her own strength. As the sun dipped below the Atlanta skyline, Clara made a silent vow. If she was no longer part of Hope's family, she would build a new life, one where she defined her own worth. The days after the discovery were a haze of grief and reflection. Clara went through the motions, cleaning her house, attending church, chatting with Mrs. Rodriguez, but the photo of Hope's wedding haunted her. Every morning, she checked her phone, hoping for a call, an apology, anything to explain why her daughter had shut her out. The silence was a wound that refused to heal, and with each unanswered message, Clara felt herself fading further from Hope's world. To distract herself, Clara began sorting through the wooden trunk in her living room, a relic from her mother's house filled with mementos of her life with Hope. She found Hope's birth certificate, her tiny handprint from kindergarten, and a stack of report cards filled with A's. Each item was a reminder of the sacrifices she'd made. She remembered the nights she'd stayed up sewing for extra cash, the mornings she'd skipped breakfast so Hope could have new shoes. She'd worked tirelessly, believing every effort was an investment in their shared future. One photo stopped her cold, Hope at 8, in a white dress for her confirmation at St. Jude's. Clara had saved for months to make that day special, renting the Magnolia Room, cooking a feast, and ordering a red velvet cake. In the photo, Hope's arms were wrapped around Clara, her smile wide and genuine. "Mama, you're the most beautiful person in the world," she'd said that day. Clara's eyes welled up, the memory a stark contrast to the present. When had that little girl decided her mother was no longer essential? Another find was a letter Hope had written at 18, just before college. The pink paper was adorned with heart doodles, and the words were a love letter to Clara's sacrifices. "You're my hero, Mama. I want to be a mother like you, loving, strong, always putting family first." Clara read it again and again, tears blurring the ink. The Hope who wrote those words seemed like a stranger now, replaced by someone who saw Clara as an inconvenience. The memories kept coming, each one a testament to Clara's devotion. She recalled Hope's Sweet 16, a celebration that had taken 2 years of savings. She'd sold her last piece of jewelry from Elijah to afford it, worked weekends at the farmer's market selling pies, and cooked enough food to feed a small army. Hope had danced with her that night to their special song, a lullaby Clara used to sing when Hope was sick. "Everyone needs to know how much I love you, Mama," Hope had said. Now, those words felt like a lie, a promise broken by years of growing distance. Clara thought of the everyday sacrifices, the early mornings making breakfast, the late nights waiting for Hope to come home from parties, the weekends spent driving her to college events. When Hope studied business administration at Georgia State, Clara had taken on extra catering jobs to cover tuition, her hands raw from cleaning, her body aching from long hours. She'd never complained, believing it was all for Hope's bright future. But that future, it seemed, had no room for her. The changes had been subtle at first. In college, Hope's calls grew shorter, her visits sporadic. She'd talk about friends Clara didn't know, places Clara couldn't imagine. When she met Devon, everything shifted. Hope's stories revolved around him, his intelligence, his ambition, his refined family. Clara had tried to welcome him, cooking elaborate dinners, but his polite detachment made her feel like an outsider in her own home. Hope's apologies for Clara's intensity stung, as if her love was something to be ashamed of. After graduation, Hope's life accelerated into a world Clara couldn't follow. She and Devon moved into a sleek apartment in Midtown, their visits to Clara's house dwindling to once a month, then less. Family traditions, like Sunday dinners at Auntie Dolores's, faded away. Hope's excuses were always the same: "Devon and I have plans." Clara had accepted it, believing it was temporary, that Hope would come back to her. But now, staring at the empty space where Hope's wedding should have been, Clara saw the truth. Her daughter had been drifting away for years, and she'd been too blinded by love to notice. The pain turned to anger, a fire Clara hadn't felt before. How could Hope betray her like this? After every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar saved, Clara had given up her youth, her dreams, her own happiness for Hope, only to be discarded like an old photograph. But the anger gave way to something deeper: shame. Had she been too much? Too unrefined for Hope's new life with the Hayeses? She thought of Franklin and Eleanor's polite smiles at Hope's graduation dinner, their subtle discomfort when she spoke of her cleaning jobs. To them, she was a relic, a working-class mother who didn't belong in their world. Clara stood and walked to the mirror in her hallway. Her reflection showed a woman worn by time, grey hair, rough hands, lines etched by years of worry. She wasn't elegant like Eleanor Hayes. She didn't know about wine or theatre. But she was a woman who had loved fiercely, who had built a life for her daughter out of nothing. Did that make her less worthy? Did it justify Hope's exclusion? She called her sister, Rosa, in Birmingham, needing someone to hear her pain. Rosa's voice was sharp with outrage. "She got married without you. That girl's lost her mind." Clara poured out the story, from Hope's college years to the wedding photo. Rosa listened, then said, "You gave her too much, Clara. You put her first every time, and now she thinks she can treat you like this. It's time you live for you." Rosa's words lingered as Clara hung up. Live for you. She'd never considered it before. Her life had been about Hope, about being the mother who never failed. But Hope had made her choice, and now Clara had to make hers. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the notebook where she used to jot down Hope's appointments. Today, she wrote something new, a new life for Clara May. The words felt foreign, but they sparked something inside her, a determination to reclaim the woman she'd lost in years of sacrifice. The decision to change her life came like a quiet storm, gathering strength in the silence of Clara's Atlanta home. She woke the next morning with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. The pain of Hope's exclusion still lingered, but it was no longer a weight holding her down, it was a catalyst pushing her forward. Clara May Harrison was done waiting for her daughter to define her worth. She would build a new life, one where she was the center, not a footnote. She began with practical steps, opening her old notebook to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote, Clara's Independence Plan, August 2024. First, she assessed her resources. Years of frugality had left her with a modest but significant savings account, a paid-off house in a now valuable Atlanta neighborhood, and a secret fund she'd kept hidden even from Hope. That fund, built from sewing dresses and weekend catering, was meant to be Hope's wedding gift, a nest egg for her new life. Clara had imagined presenting it with pride, saying, "This is for you and Devon, so you can start strong." Now, that money would fuel Clara's own future. Next, she considered her home. The small house on Maple Street held too many memories, Hope's laughter, Elijah's voice, years of waiting for calls that never came. Staying here would trap her in the past. She remembered Mrs. Rodriguez talking about her sister Gloria's move to a senior community in Decatur called Peachtree Haven. Gloria's never been happier, Mrs. Rodriguez had said. It's like she found herself again. Clara had dismissed the idea before, thinking such places were for those without family. Now, she saw them differently, a place to reclaim her independence. The final step was the hardest, redefining her relationship with Hope. Cutting ties completely felt too harsh, too final. But Clara could no longer be the mother who waited endlessly for scraps of attention. She would set boundaries, create distance, and let Hope feel the weight of her choices. It wouldn't be dramatic or vengeful, just a quiet, dignified withdrawal. On Sunday, instead of going to church, Clara set out to explore her options. She walked to the bank, her steps lighter than they'd been in weeks. Mr. Lawson, her longtime banker, greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Harrison, what brings you in on a Sunday?" he asked. "I'm planning some changes," she replied, surprised by the confidence in her voice. She asked about her savings, confirming she had enough to support a move and sustain herself for years. Mr. Lawson's respect was palpable, and for the first time, Clara saw herself as a woman with resources, not just a mother scraping by. From there, she took a bus to Decatur, to Peachtree Haven. The community was everything Mrs. Rodriguez had described: lush gardens, tidy buildings, and an air of calm purpose. The receptionist, Patricia, welcomed her with a warm smile. "Interested in a tour?" she asked. For 2 hours, Clara explored the grounds, her heart lifting with each step. The apartments were compact but inviting, with balconies overlooking the gardens. Patricia described the activities: yoga, knitting, movie nights, weekend trips to places like Savannah and Asheville. "Our residents find new purpose here," she said. "Many come after family changes, but they leave feeling alive." Clara stood on the balcony of an available apartment, imagining herself sipping coffee as the sun rose over the gardens. "I'll take this one," she said, the decision feeling both sudden and inevitable. Patricia handed her a list of required documents, and Clara left with a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in decades. Back home, she began organizing her life for the move. She sorted through papers, packed photos, and donated furniture that held too many memories. Hope's old room was the hardest: trophies, books, clothes she'd left behind. Clara boxed them carefully, renting a storage unit near Hope's apartment. If Hope wanted them, she could claim them. If not, they'd wait, like Clara had for so long. That week, Hope called twice, her voice casual, as if nothing had changed. "How's the new job?" Clara asked, keeping her own plans secret. "Great, Mema," Hope replied, talking about her apartment, her dinners with the Hayes. Clara listened, but for the first time, she didn't ache for more. She was building something new, something that didn't depend on Hope's approval. On Friday, Patricia called to confirm Clara's application was approved. She could move in Monday. That night, Clara sat in her half-packed house, surrounded by boxes and covered furniture. Instead of sadness, she felt anticipation. When Hope called Saturday, inviting her to dinner at their new apartment, Clara declined. "I have plans, baby," she said, mentioning a trip to Lake Lanny with her new community. Hope's silence was heavy. She wasn't used to Clara having a life of her own. "Maybe another time," Clara added, her voice calm but firm. Sunday's trip to Lake Lanny was a revelation. Clara met 3 women, Mercedes, Delores, and Evelyn, who welcomed her warmly. They laughed, shared stories, and made her feel like she belonged. As the bus rolled back to Peachtree Haven, Clara realized she was no longer just Hope's mother. She was Clara May, a woman with her own future. Monday morning, the movers arrived. Clara took one last walk through her house, pausing in Hope's empty room. "Thank you for teaching me to let go," she whispered. As the truck pulled away, headed for Decatur, Clara sat in the passenger seat, smiling at the road ahead. For the first time in 67 years, the future was hers to shape, and it felt like freedom. Clara's first week at Peachtree Haven was like stepping into a new world. Her apartment, though small, was hers alone, a sanctuary of soft blues and whites, with a balcony where she sipped coffee each morning, watching the gardens come alive. The community buzzed with activity, and Clara found herself drawn into a rhythm she hadn't known she craved. There were no expectations here, no need to prove her worth as a mother or a provider. She was simply Clara, and that was enough. Her neighbors became fast friends. Mrs. Mercedes, a retired teacher, shared stories of her classroom days over communal dinners. Mrs. Delores, a former clerk, regaled Clara with tales of her travels in the 70s. Mr. Alexander, a widowed carpenter, gifted her a hand-carved photo frame, his eyes twinkling with kindness. For the first time in years, Clara felt seen not as Hope's mother, but as a woman with her own stories, her own laughter. On Wednesday, she joined the knitting class, led by Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, not her neighbor, but a namesake with a warm smile. Clara's fingers, stiff from years of cleaning, found a new rhythm with the needles. "You've got talent, Clara," Mrs. Rodriguez said, admiring her embroidered napkin. The compliment warmed Clara's heart, a reminder that her skills had value beyond utility. Thursday's ballroom dancing class was a leap of faith. Mr. Alexander Davis, the instructor, guided her through cha and waltz steps with patience. "No one's judging, Clara," he said when she stumbled. "We're here to live." She laughed, her body loosening as she moved to the music, surrounded by others who celebrated her efforts. By the end of the class, she was breathless, not from exertion but from joy. That night, her phone rang. It was Hope, her voice frantic. "Mama, where are you? The house is empty." Clara's heart quickened, but she steadied herself. "I'm fine, baby," she said. "I moved to a place that suits me now." Hope's questions came fast. Where, why, what was happening? Clara answered calmly, revealing only that she was at Peachtree Haven, a community for people her age. "A retirement home?" Hope asked, her tone laced with disbelief. "No," Clara corrected. "A place where I'm happy, with my own life." The conversation turned to the wedding, the unspoken wound between them. "Why are you doing this, Mama?" Hope asked. "Are you mad at me?" Clara took a breath, her voice steady. "I'm not mad, Hope. I'm at peace. I've learned I deserve to be happy, too." She set boundaries for the first time, telling Hope their relationship needed mutual respect. The silence on the other end was heavy, but Clara felt no need to fill it. She'd said what needed saying. The days that followed were filled with new experiences. Clara joined a yoga class, surprised by her body's strength. She went on an excursion to the Georgia Aquarium, marveling at the ocean's wonders alongside her new friends. At Sunday Mass in the community chapel, she prayed not for Hope's return, but for her own continued courage. Her life was no longer defined by waiting, it was defined by living. On Friday, Patricia called her to the visitors' lounge. Hope and Devon were there, looking out of place in the elegant space. Hope's eyes were wide, almost childlike, as she stood to hug Clara. "We were worried," she said. Devon nodded, his discomfort evident. Clara invited them to sit, her demeanor calm but distant. They asked about her new home, her finances, their voices tinged with concern that felt more like control. "I'm comfortable," Clara said. "I've saved more than you know." When Hope asked if Clara was angry, she answered honestly, "I'm not angry. I'm at peace with choosing myself." The words hit like a quiet thunderclap. Hope's eyes filled with tears, but Clara felt no urge to comfort her. She loved her daughter, but love didn't mean accepting disrespect. When they left, promising to call more often, Clara felt a quiet victory. She'd set the terms of their relationship, and Hope would have to meet her halfway. That night, at the community dinner, Clara shared her story with her friends. "Everything's as it should be," she told Mrs. Mercedes, her smile genuine. For the first time, she believed it. Her life was no longer tethered to Hope's choices. She was Clara May, a woman with friends, hobbies, and a future she was shaping herself. 6 months later, Clara's life at Peachtree Haven had blossomed into something she'd never imagined. Her apartment was a haven, filled with plants she tended daily, books she read by lamplight, and photos of her new friends. She woke each morning with purpose, her days filled with knitting, dancing, and trips to places she'd only dreamed of: Savannah's historic squares, Charleston's cobblestone streets. At community dinners, she shared stories of her youth, her mother's recipes, her love of old jazz. Her friends listened, their laughter and questions reminding her she was valued for who she was, not what she could give. Hope's calls came sporadically, often from unknown numbers, her voice thick with tears on Clara's answering machine. "Mama, I'm sorry. I'll do better." Clara listened, but didn't always respond. Some wounds were too deep for apologies to heal. She'd received a letter from Hope, delivered by a lawyer, explaining the wedding exclusion as a practical decision to appease the Hayes. The coldness of the words confirmed what Clara already knew: the daughter she'd raised was gone, replaced by someone who saw their bond as a transaction, not a treasure. Clara kept the letter in a wooden box, alongside old photos and Hope's childhood keepsakes. It wasn't anger that guided her, but clarity. Her love for Hope hadn't faded, it had changed. It was a love that respected her own worth, that demanded mutual care. She'd updated her will, leaving half her assets to charities for single mothers and half to Hope, with a condition: Hope had to write a letter explaining her choices, to be delivered to Clara's lawyer. It wasn't punishment, it was a chance for reflection, a way to teach Hope that actions have consequences. Clara's days were full, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She joined a book club, discovering authors she'd never had time to read. She'd taken up gardening, her balcony blooming with begonias and roses. At Mr. Davis's dance classes, she'd mastered the foxtrot, her laughter echoing through the community hall. Her friends, Mercedes, Delores, Alexander, became her chosen family, their support a balm to the wounds Hope had left. One afternoon at the grocery store, a stranger approached, saying Hope was offering a reward for information about Clara's whereabouts. Clara smiled and said, "People find each other when they're ready." She felt no bitterness, only peace. Hope had learned a hard lesson: mothers have feelings, and love has limits. Clara had learned an even greater one: her happiness didn't depend on her daughter's approval. As she sat on her balcony, watering her plants and watching the sunrise over Decatur, Clara thought of the women like her, mothers who'd given everything, only to be pushed aside. To them, she'd say, "It's never too late to choose yourself. Your worth isn't in what you give others, but in what you claim for yourself." Her freedom wasn't born of revenge, but of self-respect, a gift she'd given herself after decades of giving to others. Clara didn't know if Hope would ever rebuild their relationship. She didn't know if her daughter would learn to value her as more than a convenience. But she knew she was enough. With the fountain's gentle hum in the background and the scent of her flowers filling the air, Clara May Harrison had found her voice, her strength, and her peace. And that was more than enough.